Well, hello, TSSG family, and welcome to the lesson review for my UMI friends for Sunday, November 26th. My name is Waynell. You're in the TSSG space, and here I share Christian content that is largely inspired by and or based on the Sunday school lessons. I am serving the UMI community, the international community, and we are back with our Team Kojic review lessons, and I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm glad for those of you all who are able to join me live. I have been given a 30-minute break from the kitchen. So I'm going to first have to ask you to please excuse the informality today. I am already on holiday for Thanksgiving. And I realized when I was about to go live, I didn't bring like any of the stuff. So no special camera, no green light. And to be very honest with you, here's the ponytail holder because I'm on kitchen duty. And so my hair has been in a ponytail. So I just took the ponytail holder out and I said, I'm going live because I cannot let my TSSG family down for this lesson review. So an early happy Thanksgiving to all of you. It is Thanksgiving weekend, and I pray that you're doing something wonderful and that you are taking those moments to kind of dial back and to sit with the blessings that you have. I am so grateful for my life, my health, my strength, my family. This has not been an easy year in many ways, but at the same time, I choose to see the blessings that are around me, and I choose to rehearse the goodness of God. And I hope that you will absolutely do the same. All right, so we are going to our UMI lesson. If you're a newbie, I want to say welcome to you. You've just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web, and what a wonderful place to be. Even if you're not like a super Sunday school student, you're in a great place if you are working to improve your Bible study habits, or you just want to pull out your Bible and dig in with us. You're going to find people who love God and love His Word, and we are indeed learning and growing together. So I hope that you will stay around. Everybody, make sure that you have subscribed to this channel, click the notification bell, and everybody, this moment, stop what you're doing right now and click that thumbs up like button. The last thing I'm going to ask you to do is please share this content with someone. If your church has a page, your personal page, please share this lesson, especially as we get into this week's lesson from the book of Job. In our UMI space, we have been going through the entire Bible in a year. And so this week we get to the book of Job. And we know that Job's life was filled with a lot of unplanned unhappiness, things that happened that no one would want to sign up for. And I think a lot of people find ourselves in situations where we didn't sign up for this kind of thing that happens. And I believe that this lesson helps us to find those nuggets and how we push through and how we make it when tragedy occurs. And that is our lesson title. We're going to Job chapter 1, verses 14, 15, 18, 19, 22, then to chapter 3, verses 1 through 3 and 11. I'm going to pray, and then we'll get into our scripture reading. Father, I bless you. And today, I certainly honor you and give you thanks just for who you are and what you mean to us in our lives. Thank you so much for life and for health and for strength. And God, we thank you today that you allow us into this space for the study of your word. God, as we go through life, and life is not always easy. Life sometimes deals us blows that we don't expect. I thank you that you never leave us, that you are always present, even in what seems like tragedy to us. Thank you that we're always inside of your will, and we are always in a position that we can come to you, and that you care about us, and you care about the things that affect us. You care about the things that hurt us, and you care about our emotion as we go through. So God, today I pray that you open up our minds, our hearts, our understanding to receive something new from a very familiar story. And I pray that you'll bless those who are present now, and even those who catch the replay. We love you. We give you glory. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, let's go to, I'm reading from my notes here, so I've got to scroll a bit. I'm going to go to Job chapter 1, starting at verse 14. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Verse 18. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, thy sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the four corners of the house. And it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Verse 22. And all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Chapter 3. After this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man child conceived. Verse 11, why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? And that is our reading for this week. We're going to fill in a lot of space in there, again, as we are into this lesson about Job. If you want the TSSG notes, I will come back in and link them in the description box right now. It tells you to go to the website, and they've been there for a minute for you to go ahead and download those notes. I think this week's notes may be 10 pages long because, again, even though we're going to discuss just a snippet of the life of Job, and really specifically, like, how do we process and how do we behave when those tough things happen in our lives, I want you to be able to grab these notes if you are interested in them. So let me give you this sort of as a premise. As we've gone through this Bible in a year, and especially as we get to really familiar texts, I am not here today to rehearse the children's story version of what happened with Job. Like, you can pick up any kid's Bible and Job is going to be in there. And we know that there were several tragedies that happened. But as an adult now who is managing my own life, and again, things that happen that I don't necessarily plan on. And, we're coming to the end of the year, and I'm even looking back at life, and I'm being very reflective now and looking at what have I accomplished and what has gone on and what do I think is up ahead. I think all of us will find ourselves in spaces at some point on a day or an event that we did not plan on. And so I am looking for and have been looking for those nuggets that will help me know and help you know how to navigate and how we can really build ourselves such that we are able to face tragedy head on when it happens. Now, I'll say this as a premise. Tough stuff is not fun. It's not fun at all. And yet all of us are going to have to face something tough in our lives. We have this title, When Tragedy Occurs. And so when tragedy occurs, what do? Do you freeze up and stand still? Do you run away from God? Do you say, I'm going to give up on this? I'm going to throw in the towel. It's not worth it. Or do you find yourself running to God? I think as we look in our communities, we see so many different things. I always think about September 11th and how immediately after September 11th, there were statistically more people who were in church, involved in places of worship than any other time that we can remember. Why? Because I think that sort of jolted everyone. That tragedy jolted people, and a lot of people found themselves running to God. But just the same, there are lots of people who do give up on their faith when tragedy happens. What is tragedy? And I'll let you tell me in the comments, what do you think tragedy is? What is tragedy? A tragedy is basically an unfortunate sequence of events or a sad outcome. Often it involves like the downfall of an individual. So in some way, it is like those events that are marked by sorrow or, again, disaster or significant hardship. Those are my definitions of what tragedy is. And we see that in the life of Job. Let me slow down for just a moment because, again, in the Bible in a year, we've always paused to look at the background. So Job is our 18th book of the Old Testament. Of the Old Testament. I'm sorry. And it is classified as a book of poetry and wisdom literature in the Bible. So it's known for addressing, like, again, these conversations and questions around suffering. And you know how people ask the question, like, where is God in all of this? It sort of explores like the justice of God and really looking at our limits of human understanding, that place where it does get really hard to see where is God in this. The author of the book of Job is uncertain, but there are some commentaries that attribute it to Job himself. And so that is a widely accepted author for the book. The purpose of the book, again, is to answer those questions, like reconciling our understanding of the existence of evil, addressing the conversation of a just and all-powerful God, a sovereign God, how a righteous man, a prosperous man, goes through this level of trial, right? Like we ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? That's essentially what the book of Job gives us as we look at this man who suffered loss in his family, in his wealth, in his health. And we look at the complexities of that human suffering and the nature of God in it. Again, those major themes, same thing, suffering and righteousness, God's justice, wisdom and human limitations, God's sovereignty, and really repenting and restoration. So again, the purpose is to help us to grapple with those difficult questions around human understanding. So let's talk about who Job is. Who was Job? Job is a biblical figure who is the center of the story that we see in the book that's given his name. We meet Job in chapter 1, verse 1, and we learn that he's a wealthy man. He is a righteous man. So he has resource, but he also is very tapped in. He is described as someone who fears God. And the King James says that he eschews evil. I love that. But what does that really mean? It means that he does everything that he possibly can to put distance between himself and evil. He is focused on doing what is right. He is a husband. He is a father. He's a family man. We know his wealth. Why? Because he has extensive livestock, and we see the prosperity all around him. He is a man whose faith is going to be tested. We're going to talk about that. He's a man who suffers great loss, trial after trial. He is a man who had emotion, a man who had feelings, and a man who used his words and showed his grief and his emotions as he went through. But he's also a man who God does not leave. He is a man who is restored. And although we won't get to that in this lesson today, just know that towards the end of the book, God does restore Job and in fact gives him double for all that he's been through. So let's kind of walk through this tragedy that happens, and it's going to walk us right into our chapter 1, verse 14 is where our printed text begins. So we've met our central character, who is Job, and we've got Satan, who appears before God in a heavenly assembly, and God is like proud of Job. He is praising Job's righteousness, and Satan is like, hey, yeah, he does all that, but he really only does that because of your blessings. If you weren't blessing him like this, he would not praise you like he does. He wouldn't serve you like he does. He wouldn't put distance between himself and evil. And so this essentially is where testing begins, because God allows Satan to test Job, but he has a stipulation on that. He does not allow him to harm his physical person. And so that walks us right up to verse 14 and 15. Again, we don't get to make an appointment with difficult times. We don't get to say difficulty. I'm thinking November 29th. That's not really a good day. Can you hold off until the week of MLK Day? At least we'll be in a new year. No, you don't get to decide when challenges and when difficulty come up on you. And so Job, on a regular day, this upright man, this man who fears God, receives a messenger who says to him, your oxes were out plowing and the asses were out feeding, and the Sabians came and they fell and they took them away. What does that mean? It means that suddenly Job, a good man, a faithful man, a righteous man, a blessed man, suddenly finds himself in the midst of a very bad situation. We're going to talk very specifically about it, but before we do, here are a couple of ahas for me. First of all, bad things do happen to good people. Yes, they do. Bad things happen to good people, no matter how good you may see yourself to be or try to be, or how you honor God. All of us are going to experience something in life. Our days, right? Few on the earth, but full of trouble, right? So here we have Job, this good man with bad things happening. Again, here's a second aha for me. That bad things happening does not mean that someone has done wrong. Remember, in the New Testament, there were people asking Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents? When bad things happen, it doesn't mean that the person has done something wrong. Job is inside of the sovereignty and the plan, the will of God. This sudden and profound loss, this critical moment in this narrative where Job loses all of his what creates his wealth, right? That is his livestock. When you drive along the highway, if you see a herd of cows, your mind ought to just say cha-ching, because that is someone's wealth in that field. So when he loses his wealth, that is a component again of his wealth and his prosperity. The oxen and the donkeys have been raided, and as a matter of fact, the servants who were out there as well were raided as well. They were killed too. We have this mention of the Sabians and the Chaldeans. That is, the Sabians were from Arabia, and the Chaldeans were from Babylon. And what we can take away from that is really looking at how these external forces were responsible for these attacks. I think of it in a way like almost like terrorists, like foreign attacks on your person, on what belongs to you. So here is a foreign attack on his wealth. Again, my ahas: prosperity does not equal righteousness, but Job was a righteous man. When we look at his response to the loss of his livestock, again, he's going to be resilient in this tragedy, but looking at how your faith has to be above even material possession, and even how there is, let's keep going here. I don't want to take this one yet. Let me keep going. So we see that he's lost his livestock, right? And verse 18, while he's trying to process what is going on, here's why it is such a tragedy. It's not just that he lost his livestock in a day, but while he's trying to process that, here comes something else. And I want to pause right here because I know some of you have had that kind of year in 2023. I know people personally. By the time you process one thing, there is another coming right at you. One of my very good friends, literally 2 weeks ago, they said farewell to her mother-in-law. And this week, her own mother went to be with the Lord. Again, processing thing after thing. We have to sit ourselves inside of that fact pattern, not specifically Job's thing, because you may not lose cattle in one day and servants in one day and children in one day, but we can understand what it means to just be trying to get over one thing or get your mind around something, and here comes something else. My young people say it like this: for Job, life is lifing, and it's lifing on a level that he never could imagine, because while he's processing the livestock and the servants, here comes someone to let him know that there's more of this tragedy that is going to unfold. Because in this same day, he also loses not just one, but all of his children in a tragic accident. A wind comes, they're having a meal at the house of the eldest brother, and while they are there, the structure collapses, resulting in the death of all of his children. Have you ever had a time where you feel like, I just cannot catch a break? That is what is going on as Job's issues begin to happen. And here's the thing: they are sudden and they are simultaneous. And I think that's what gets so, that's what pulls us so into the story of Job, is that it is sudden, wasn't on his list of things to do, and it was simultaneous, just back to back. Not only that, but it's not just his finances, because sometimes you can have something going on in one area, and yes, it's a lot, but at least it's just my finances. But now it's multiple areas for Job, and this is happening in rapid succession. These calamities are intensifying, and they are coming one after the other. And I'll tell you what, I see the humanity of Job inside of this, because this begins to take a psychological toll on him. Again, all of this he is trying to grapple with. And in the midst of this, we know, right, that all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. But when you're going through tough stuff, I'm going to be honest with you, in the middle of your tragedy, it is sometimes hard to see, God, how are you working this out? That's why I believe these lessons come to help us. So if you find yourself like a Job, going through thing after thing as you study this lesson, just know God has not left you. And maybe it's not your time of tragedy as we study this lesson. This is the time to build up your mind so that when something comes your way, we don't fall apart, but we know that God has a way of working this out for our ultimate good. So the ahas here for me, he's dealing with a bunch of things at one time. He's telling us here that a lot of things can happen It is possible that we too could go through things that involve material, family, personal, and it's going to challenge us to consider that complexity of grief and loss. Like, how do we reconcile all of that? But also, as we look at Job, again, this grief and this sadness that we see that he experiences, this pulls us into looking at how do we cope with that kind of pain? How do we cope with sadness? How do we navigate grief? This is death in scripture, this immediate response that we see in Job. It's not in the printed text, but in verse 20, Job's immediate response was grief. Right in that tragedy, he is grieving, but we also see in verse 21, he doesn't just fall apart and not balance that out with something else. Yeah, he's hurt. We absolutely see that. And we're going to see some other responses that he has. But I want you to notice, not in the printed text, but I hope you read it, that his response was, yes, mourning. He tore his robe. He shaved his head, but he worshiped God. Like in the middle of everything going on. Verse 21, and naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord had taken away. I've lost. He gave it to me. I've lost it all. But in spite of all that, blessed be the name of the Lord. Are we able to put ourselves in that place of worship and not lose that connection with God, even in our most difficult times? Is it possible? Is it possible to give thanks and to hurt at the same time? And we see a model where that is possible, that although he is hurting, he has lost so much, he has not lost it. He has a resilient faith. I'm going to use that word again and again, that his response really does demonstrate what you and I must build up. And that is a resilience in faith. I've been listening to some interesting podcasts, and they've really been conversations about how do we reconcile emotion, the emotions that we feel, with our faith. How do we reconcile in a way that we honor those emotions, that we honestly allow ourselves to feel them and express them and get what we need while not abandoning what we know about God? And at the same time, bringing that balance so that everything isn't just scripture recitation without being allowed those honest spaces of, this hurt, this didn't feel good, I'm concerned, without having a space, without losing the space to give that emotional response. And so Job, I think, shows us a balance in that his emotion is present, but his faith is present too. And again, this is a model for me for enduring adversity. And it also, again, shows the complexity of human emotion. While his words express submission and praise, they do not negate the fact that he is grieving. He is sorrowful. Everything about this. So again, that's why I talk about this complexity of human emotion, even in the face of tragedy, that you can both feel pain and still be committed to your praise. It is possible. Verse 22. Again, the response to this tragedy is normal. I don't think anybody could lose. I say so often, like I buried a father. I cannot imagine losing my mother, but at some point, one of us will lose the other if we're not raptured together, right? But I always, like, my heart goes out to parents who bury children. I've been with friends now who have had to bury children, and it is a sad day. When my best friend passed away, I remember her mother looking at me that morning as we were, getting her dressed, and she says, "Waynell, this is the hardest day of my life." And so I think about that with a Job. And so this kind of reaction is normal. And I will say this, that each of us responds, right, to tragedy in different ways. But let's focus on what Job does in verse 22. This is the conclusion of chapter 1, where he really shapes his mindset. Like, I see this as a mindset, because even though he's in a hard place, like, he's having to decide early on what it's going to be, because the mindset that he establishes right now really just establishes his posture for how he's going to journey through this suffering and not lose his faith. He has accepted the tragedies that have occurred. And he says, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." God is sovereign even in the midst of what he's lost. So he maintains his trust in God despite his overwhelming loss. And the text tells us that because he chooses to do that, he doesn't charge God foolishly. What does it mean to charge God foolishly? He does not charge God, oh, God, you wrong for that. He doesn't charge God with wrongdoing. He acknowledges this connection between receiving the good of God and accepting the diversity that comes with just our being human. So there's acceptance and there is trust. He accepts that God is sovereign. Satan appears before God again, not in our printed text, and God praises Job again for his continued faith despite his loss. And Satan challenges that if Job is physically affected his health, that he will curse God. And so in chapter 2, he is attacked physically. He has a condition that appears in his body. It's involves boils and rotting skin. And he's at the point that even scraping his skin to, I guess, try to get some type of relief. And he tears his robe and he shaves his head and he collapses to the ground. Again, he feels this pain, this attack to his core. What do you do when you feel pain to your core? Verse 1 tells us that he opened his mouth and he cursed his day. What day is that? The day that he was born. He thought it would be better that I not even be born. It would have been better if I had never been conceived. And I don't judge Job's response, right? Because I was really thinking about, like, how do we respond? Because pain is real. Okay, so when you've been through pain, there are some people who will, they'll stand completely still. They freeze up. We talk about fright and flight. They will absolutely freeze up. They stand still, whether it's emotionally or spiritually or even physically. The weight of the pain can be so overwhelming that they are in a place that they feel like they are able to move forward. And in a spiritual sense, that puts you in a place of spiritual stagnation where you are stuck in your faith journey. And it might be where you're stuck with all those questions and trying to figure out, like, this disconnect that you feel with God. And there are some people who will move away from God. There are people in certain circumstances where pain has led the individual to create distance between themselves and God. If that's what God is, I don't want him. I can do better by myself. Their suffering may even invoke feelings of like anger or frustration or disillusionment in their faith. I don't need that. I'm walking away from that. And so that, again, manifests in a way where they deliberately walk away from religious practices, or you may see a gradual drifting away from them spiritually. So moving away from God, again, that is a crisis in faith. When you find distance like that after you've experienced pain, again, grappling with those questions that you don't understand. But then there are some people who move closer to God. For some people, pain is that catalyst that says, I've got to find God. I know that he's the only one that can help me. It's that time where their faith is built, becomes more resilient. How? As they realize that I can't do this on my own. So they seek God for guidance, for comfort, for strength. And moving closer to God is also a time when some people develop that really, what I'll call, more sincere and desire for intimate and personal relationship with the divine Father. So we've got Job here, who is pretty disillusioned about the day that he was even born. He said, I wish it would have been better even if I had been stillborn. Like, why didn't I just die in my mother's womb? And pay attention to the fact that up until this point, this is actually a shift, because this is the first time that Job really breaks his silence, right? In response to his own overwhelming tragedy, here is this, you may have seen the word, this lament. It is this deep despair, this response to his suffering and his loss, despite his, the friends. We didn't even talk about the friends. We don't have time to talk about the friends today, but despite even his, sometimes well-intentioned, sometimes misguided friends, now this is his raw expression of his emotional anguish, his despair. He vocalizes the depth of his suffering. Again, questions, if this is what you were going to allow to happen to me, why did you even let me be born? Right? And again, this is his real human experience, grappling with questions, feeling overwhelmed by tragedy, struggling with a God who he loves and views as Lord of all, who sometimes seems like he's not doing things in a fair way. So again, he laments this question of why. Why am I even here? Verse 11 is that question, why didn't you allow me even to die in my mother's womb before I even came out of the belly? Again, this moment of emotional anguish, this lament. He expresses a wish that he had never been born. And here's what I really gained from the lament. And again, I've been like personally looking at lots of content and conversation around like that balance of emotion and where do we situate that as believers. Like we can't be all emotional, but we can't be all just, so closed off with the Bible that we're not honest enough about the spaces that we experience and what we feel. And so the first thing that I see in this lament of Job is, first of all, permission to lament. Job he gives permission really to himself to lament, to express the pain and the despair of the tragedy. It is an acknowledgement, and I see this raw emotion, this honest communication with God. I think with Job, again, we also see this complexity that comes along with profound loss, that comes along with grief, and acknowledges that when we lose, right, that we do struggle with that grief, and we've got to find that meaning in the midst of the tragedy. But I also see that God gives us a space, and I love the premise that he doesn't charge God foolishly, but at the same time, it doesn't say that he doesn't ask God questions, right? You see this series of questions that he raises about even the nature of his own existence. What is the purpose of this suffering? What is this all about? So I believe that God gives us a safe space to ask questions, yes, when tragedy occurs in our own lives. I also believe that God shows his sovereignty in the midst of the things that we go through, that we know it, we receive it, but he also assures us of his, he's there with us, right, as we go through the things that we go through. I use this phrase, embracing the freedom to lament. And I wanted to look at how does that play out in our lives today? What does that look like? Because we're probably not going outside to, rent our garments and shave our heads, but what does that look like to process tragedy, to process hard things? And I really came up with 10 ways, and these are all in the TSSG notes, that it's about recognizing and accepting emotion, creating a safe space for those emotions to be let out. I'm a person who likes to journal, and verbal expression I know is helpful. I have people around me who like to talk things out. I'm not always a talker. And depending on what I am feeling, the safest place may be for me to write things down. It's funny, a few months ago, I was cleaning up my mother's house and I literally found journals from high school and one from middle school where that was my safe space to write things out, even as, a young teenager, the things that I liked, the things that I didn't like. Oh, dad made me clean my room. Oh, mom told me I can't go out tonight. Or, she's just trying to be the boss. I said all those things in my teen journal, but I say all that to say, even as an adult, a safe space for me even now is journaling. Some of you may find ways to lament through artistic expression, whether that is creative drawing or painting or even music may help. Prayer and meditation. I never negate the importance of prayer and meditation. And yes, this is a great lesson for us to focus on the importance and the availability of professional support. If your emotions have become too overwhelming, you do not have to do life by yourself. You can consider seeking the support of a therapist or a counselor. There are so many amazing therapists and counselors who are available to help you. Shout out to my friend Chantel Biddings. There are amazing counselors who can help. And also, when you're going through, don't forget the value of your community. Don't put yourself in a room. Don't go through by yourself, but connect with others and then give yourself that space. It does take time to process hard things. So give yourself realistic expectations on time to grieve, time to work through tragedy. You don't just have to jump back in. I was in a conversation last week. We had a grief workshop at my church, and I heard some of the subsequent dialogue, how people talked about, after maybe a funeral or whatever, you've done everything for a loved one. Like I think about with my dad, like I did everything in the hospital. I was on it every day. I was visiting every day. I was talking with doctors, and then when he passed away, great. Okay, I'm doing business at the funeral home, and I'm taking care of everything, and I'm taking his clothes down there, and I wanted the programs just right, and I'm talking to the graphic artist, and it just felt like I was still doing for him. Even the day of the service, I got up, I went to the church early. I wanted to make sure they had him inside. I wanted the flowers a certain way. I'm going to tell you, when it was time for me to leave the cemetery, I froze up for just a second because I was like, whoa, there's nothing else to do. Like I'm just supposed to leave him out here now and that's it. And I found myself that as long as I was like busy and into something, it didn't leave space for me to deal with what had really just happened. And so I think all of us have to give ourselves like that realistic expectation and give yourself the space where you're not just busy being busy like I was, but giving yourself that time to really connect and to feel those emotions and to really look at how those moments create growth for us. I know I'm way over my 30 minutes. They're waiting on me in the kitchen. Let me give you my word of the week. My word of the week is resilient. And I'm going to frame up my key learnings as I've been doing by using this acronym. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 12 tells us that we are hard pressed on every side, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, but we're not in despair. Persecuted, but we're not abandoned. Cast down, but we are not destroyed. And for me, that's another way of saying that God has designed us to have the capacity to be resilient. We're not necessarily just resilient by nature, but as we build up our faith, lean into our faith, and know that a sovereign God never leaves us, we have this capacity to be resilient believers. So my R is reflecting on insights, and I can reflect on the insights that I see in the book of Job as he navigated his profound suffering. I can express my feelings. I'm going to be encouraged to be like Job and to honestly express my feelings during times of tragedy or when I go through tough stuff. S, seek a higher purpose. That I am inspired by Job to realize that like the stuff that happens in a day, like it may be wearing you out in that day, but it's all a part of this collection of things that is really about the higher purpose of God in my life in the midst of suffering. I is to identify with strength that I have within. And again, Job's resilience tells me that there is a strength inside of me that even in challenging times that God gives me the capacity, yes, to tap into, that I can use that strength inside of me to make sure that I don't turn my back on God, but I need to use that strength inside of me to lean into God and lean into my faith. L is for leveraging adversity for growth, and I can be transformed personally and spiritually, even as I go through tough stuff. I can find where is God, and I can also find like, how do I feel my faith built up, even as I have to experience tough stuff. I can initiate healing conversations, just like Job had open dialogue, and yep, he talked to his friends, even though misguided sometimes, even though they didn't always say the right things. I can initiate those healing conversations. I appreciate the community that God has placed around me and the safe spaces that he gives me to have those conversations. E, I can embrace new beginnings, just like Job, who, again, we didn't get to chapter 42 where he's eventually restored. But even as I go through tough stuff, I always call those things the new normal. And in a weird way, there is a hope in knowing that there are new beginnings and that God is a part of that new beginning. And I can navigate tragedy with trust. And again, God is sovereign, and looking at Job and the fact that he trusted God, right? Even in the midst of what he went through. And finally, T, I can trust in God's divine timing, that even though I don't get to make an appointment with tragedy, I can know that like nothing happens in my life that is not already planned and orchestrated inside of God's perfect timing for Waynell's life. So whatever is happening in my journey, when I go through things and I've been through suffering, I've been through being restored. I know I got days ahead. Listen, I keep telling folks the women in my family are living to be over 100 years old. So I still got some time to live. And I just want to make sure that I am, again, building my faith up in a way that I understand that when tragedy occurs, that I can lean into God, I can lean into my faith, and that I know God will sustain me and that He is always working in suffering for a higher purpose. This is our lesson for this week. I'm getting ready to head back down. What are y'all cooking? What are you doing for Thanksgiving dinner? I got to finish my contributions for today, and I'll do some on tomorrow. Let me tell you two things very quickly. If you're not already a part of the TSSG Connect, please get over to the website. We would love to have you join us. We are, again, a wonderful community, learning and growing. Our Markup Monday sessions have been fantastic. You're going to find your weekly downloads there for your TSSG notes. Team Kojic family, if you happen to be seeing this video, you're not in the Connect just yet. Give me a few more days to kind of get my bearings with having us back in this space, and we'll figure out how we can make all that work. But my UMI and ISSL friends, your notes are downloaded. We have a fantastic group on Facebook. And also those of y'all, last Saturday was the first session of True Colors in Sunday School. I was nervous. I was excited. It was all those things. And let me tell you what, it was different than any conference I've ever done. And yet it was probably one of the most impactful experiences I've ever had in the TSSG space. And I'm going to share some of the clips of people's responses to the training. Our keynote speaker is Takitha Carter, and you got one more chance. It's not a 2-day conference. It was a choice of dates. And so we're going to do the conference again on the 3rd Saturday in December. I've had 2 church teams to sign up since then. I am telling you, bring your team. Like, get a group together and come. You're welcome to come as an individual, but if you are a Christian ed leader or a superintendent, bring your team and come take advantage of this training. I love what one person said. Like, when she left, she said, this is going to work in my job. It's going to work in my personal business. It's going to work in my church. I'm telling you, there is fantastic information in that True Colors assessment and how it plays into our ministry spaces. I love you all so much. I am thankful for you, thankful for this community, and I'm excited about whatever God is going to allow next. And I'm working on some stuff that it keeps me up at night. I'm excited about serving God in this space. So again, thank you all so much. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment box down below, and I'll see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing in this space with us today. If this ministry has blessed you in any way, I invite you to consider sharing a small gift of just $3 with us. You can do so by scanning one of the QR codes on the screen. And please don't forget, we are waiting for you to join us over in the TSSG Connect. You can see all the benefits here on the screen, and we look forward to serving you in a more personal way. Have you had an opportunity to visit our amazing swag shop? Stop by and check out great items for Sunday school and church school. This includes t-shirts, pouches, mugs, and so much more. Find something that you'll enjoy or something for your favorite teacher.